When you think of ancient Rome, what comes to mind? Probably majestic ruins, right? Well, for a moment, let's forget the ruins and imagine a living, breathing city. A noisy, crowded, sprawling megacity of 1 million people, facing problems we'd recognize today: traffic, crime, housing, food shortages. This wasn't some ancient relic, it was the largest city on Earth, and running it was one of the greatest challenges of the ancient world. So the big question is, how on earth did they do it?
I mean, seriously, put yourself in their shoes for a second. You're in charge of a city of 1 million people. No electricity, no modern sanitation, no refrigeration. How do you feed everyone? How do you stop the whole place from burning down? And maybe most importantly, how do you keep 1 million restless people from rioting? This was the day-to-day reality for Rome's first emperors, the Julio-Claudians, and their solutions, or their failures, shaped the city for centuries.
So, in this explainer, we're going to break down how these emperors tackled this impossible job of running Rome. We'll look at the most critical issues: keeping the city fed, transforming its physical landscape, managing public morale, and trying to impose order on the chaos. And then, we'll see if we can reach a final verdict on their rule. All right, first up, the most fundamental challenge of all: food. For the emperor, a stable grain supply wasn't just, good policy, it was a matter of political survival. An empty stomach was the absolute fastest route to a full-blown riot. And to really drive home just how precarious this all was, get this. The philosopher Seneca tells us that when the emperor Caligula died, Rome was just over a week away from mass starvation. 8 days. Just think about that. One delayed grain fleet, one bad storm, and the entire city could just descend into chaos. This wasn't some far-off threat. It was a constant ticking clock. So how did an emperor solve a problem like that? Well, enter Claudius. Faced with this exact problem, he didn't just hope for the best. He engineered a solution. According to the historian Suetonius, Claudius tackled the problem from every single angle. He ensured grain ships against storms, a genius move that incentivized merchants to sail year-round. He built a massive, state-of-the-art harbor at Ostia to handle more ships. He even offered benefits to non-Romans who would build and operate grain transports. I mean, this was a masterclass in practical, long-term planning. But here's the thing. How we view an emperor's success often depends on who's telling the story. Take Tiberius. The historian Tacitus kind of gives him credit, admitting that, yeah, prices were high, but it wasn't really the emperor's fault, and he did work to secure the supply. But then you read another historian, Velleius Paterculus, and he portrays Tiberius as this master administrator whose rule guaranteed stable grain prices. Two sources, one emperor, two very different shades of success. Okay, so running Rome wasn't just about survival, it was about image. The emperors needed to project power, stability, and glory, and they did that by literally reshaping the city itself. You've probably heard Augustus's famous boast. It wasn't just an exaggeration, it was a statement of intent. He understood that a grand capital city was a central propaganda for his new regime. Building projects weren't just infrastructure, they were monuments to his power and his family's legacy. And the sheer scale of his efforts was just breathtaking. He built a brand new forum bearing his own name, a new Senate house, a massive basilica for law courts, and a temple to his deified father, Julius Caesar. On top of all that, he claims to have restored 82 temples and overhauled the city's roads and aqueducts. He utterly transformed the heart of Rome. Now, according to Suetonius, this set a standard his successor, Tiberius, simply failed to meet. Where Augustus beautified the city and even encouraged private citizens to chip in, Suetonius flatly states that Tiberius constructed no magnificent public works. Whether this was because he was a miser or just had different priorities, the contrast in their public image was stark. But other emperors definitely followed Augustus's lead. This number, 350 million sesterces, a truly colossal fortune, was the staggering cost of the new aqueducts built by Claudius. The historian Pliny the Elder called this project one of the most remarkable achievements in the entire world. It was a colossal investment that provided Rome with clean water for centuries. So, the people were fed and the city looked magnificent. But keeping 1 million people content required more than just grain and marble. It required a distraction, a spectacle. It required the infamous policy of bread and circuses. And Augustus was the undisputed master of this. In his own autobiography, the Res Gestae, he proudly lists the spectacles he provided. The scale is just astonishing. He personally sponsored massive games 4 times and funded them for other magistrates 23 times. And these weren't small affairs. Suetonius reports that some 3,500 wild animals were killed in the arena during his reign. This was entertainment on an epic scale. What's fascinating is how this was all framed. Suetonius, writing decades later, gives Augustus the benefit of the doubt. He claims these lavish spectacles weren't some cynical ploy to win popularity, but were genuinely for the public welfare. It was presented as an emperor's duty to provide for his people's happiness. But we have to ask, can we really accept that? Was giving the people free food and bloody spectacles truly about their welfare? Or was it a calculated strategy to keep a potentially rebellious population distracted and loyal to the regime? This question gets to the very heart of imperial rule. Beyond food and entertainment, an emperor had to deal with the gritty daily reality of urban life: crime, fires, legal disputes, and the constant threat of collapse in the crowded tenement blocks. To tackle this, Augustus created one of his most lasting innovations, the Vigiles. This was a professional public force that acted as both a fire brigade and a night watch. For the first time, Rome had an official body dedicated to preventing the two things its citizens feared most: catastrophic fires and crime in the dark streets. But even with the Vigiles, disaster could strike. And in AD 64, under the Emperor Nero, it did. The Great Fire of Rome was one of the worst catastrophes in the city's history, raging for over a week and leaving vast swaths of the capital in ashes. Now, while Nero's popular legacy is one of a tyrant who fiddled while Rome burned, the historian Tacitus paints a very different picture of his response. He tells us Nero implemented a series of surprisingly modern and competent urban reforms. He improved the water supply, mandated the use of fireproof stone, redesigned neighborhoods with wider streets to act as fire breaks, and organized relief for the homeless. On paper, it was a model of effective crisis management. And then Suetonius gives us this. After clearing away the rubble, Nero built himself a monstrously extravagant new palace, the Domus Aurea, or Golden House. And upon moving in, he supposedly declared, "Now I can at last begin to live like a human being." This single, cynical quote completely undermines the image of the competent administrator and reinforces the legacy of a self-serving tyrant. So, after looking at all these different challenges, what's the final verdict? How effective were the Julio-Claudians at actually running their megacity? Well, if we look at how our main ancient sources portray them, a clear pattern emerges. Augustus and Claudius are generally praised for their practical administration and building projects. Tiberius gets a mixed review, while Gaius and Nero are condemned, often portrayed as incompetent or tyrannical. Ultimately, the rise of the emperors brought a new level of organization and monumental construction to Rome. They created institutions and infrastructure that lasted for centuries. But, and this is a huge but, our entire understanding of this period is filtered through the eyes of a tiny, educated elite. Men like Tacitus and Suetonius, who were often senators with their own political agendas. And that leaves us with a final provocative question. The Julio-Claudians certainly remade the city of Rome in their own image. But when we read these ancient accounts, are we getting the true story of how that city was run and what life was like for its 1 million inhabitants? Or are we simply reading the official history, the one the powerful wanted to be told?